Lena never thought her day would end with her being snatched off the streets of her small town by a bunch of aliens. That's exactly what happened, though. It all started like any other day. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the city, and she was heading home after her shift at the local diner. She'd been working late, trying to make ends meet, just like so many others. But that evening, something strange was in the air. A low hum vibrated through the ground. At first, she thought it was just an odd noise from the construction site nearby, but it wasn't. It was a sound she couldn't explain, like the air itself was vibrating. Lena paused for a moment, looking around. The streets were mostly empty. The usual evening traffic had died down. She brushed off the odd feeling and continued walking, trying to shake off the unease crawling up her spine. But then, it happened. A strange flash of light exploded in the sky, momentarily blinding her. She instinctively shielded her eyes with her hand, but when she looked up again, the street around her was eerily silent. No cars, no people, just empty sidewalks. Before she could even process what was going on, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. Her legs felt unsteady, as if she were being pulled from below, and before she could react, the world went black. When Lena came to, the first thing she noticed was the cold. It wasn't just any cold, though. It was a biting, unnatural chill that felt like it was coming from all directions at once. Her head throbbed as she slowly lifted it, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The air smelled metallic, almost sterile, and there was a low hum in the background, just like the one she'd heard before everything went dark. She blinked a few times, her vision clearing, and immediately wished it hadn't. She was inside some kind of metallic room, its walls shimmering with an alien glow. The floor beneath her was smooth and strange, almost as if it were made of liquid metal that moved with her every step. Lena's heart began to race. Where am I? What is this place? Her breath came faster, and she tried to move her legs to stand up, but something was holding her down. Looking down, she saw the restraints, long, cold straps that bound her wrists and ankles to the floor. Panic gripped her chest, but she quickly forced it down. Stay calm, she told herself. She looked around, trying to get a sense of her surroundings. The room was dark, but the walls glowed faintly with a light she couldn't identify. A strange humming noise filled the air, and as she turned her head, she realized there were figures standing at the edges of the room watching her. Aliens. Lena's stomach dropped. They weren't human, not by a long shot. Their bodies were tall and thin, almost insect-like, with a sleek, black exoskeleton that shimmered in the dim light. Their eyes were huge and bulbous, glowing faintly with an eerie yellow light. They were staring at her with expressions that seemed both cold and calculating. The fear that had momentarily been pushed aside came rushing back. What do they want with me? The aliens didn't speak, but one of them stepped forward, a tall figure that stood even higher than the rest. It moved with smooth, practiced motions, like it was in complete control of the situation. As it neared, Lena tensed, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what they were going to do to her, but whatever it wasn't going to be good. The tall alien raised its hand, and the restraints holding Lena's arms and legs seemed to loosen of their own accord. She didn't dare try to escape, though. Not yet. Instead, she just watched as the alien spoke in a language she didn't understand. It was a sharp, clicking sound, the words flowing from its mouth in rapid succession. She could feel the tension in the air, but the meaning was lost on her. Then the alien stepped aside, and another figure approached. This one was different, a bit smaller, but its posture was still rigid and unyielding. It held something in its hand, some kind of device that glowed with a soft blue light. The alien aimed it at Lena's head, and she felt a strange tingling sensation along her skull. It didn't hurt, but it felt wrong. She tried to pull away, but the alien pressed the device closer. What are they doing to me? Lena never thought her day would end with her being snatched off the streets of her small town by a bunch of aliens. That's exactly what happened, though. It all started like any other day. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the city, and she was heading home after her shift at the local diner. She'd been working late, trying to make ends meet, just like so many others. But that evening, something strange was in the air. A low hum vibrated through the ground. At first, she thought it was just an odd noise from the construction site nearby, but it wasn't. It was a sound she couldn't explain, like the air itself was vibrating. Lena paused for a moment, looking around. The streets were mostly empty. The usual evening traffic had died down. She brushed off the odd feeling and continued walking, trying to shake off the unease crawling up her spine. But then, it happened. A strange flash of light exploded in the sky, momentarily blinding her. She instinctively shielded her eyes with her hand, but when she looked up again, the street around her was eerily silent. No cars, no people, just empty sidewalks. Before she could even process what was going on, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. Her legs felt unsteady, as if she were being pulled from below, and before she could react, the world went black. When Lena came to, the first thing she noticed was the cold. It wasn't just any cold, though. It was a biting, unnatural chill that felt like it was coming from all directions at once. Her head throbbed as she slowly lifted it, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The air smelled metallic, almost sterile, and there was a low hum in the background, just like the one she'd heard before everything went dark. She blinked a few times, her vision clearing, and immediately wished it hadn't. She was inside some kind of metallic room, its walls shimmering with an alien glow. The floor beneath her was smooth and strange, almost as if it were made of liquid metal that moved with her every step. Lena's heart began to race. Where am I? What is this place? Her breath came faster, and she tried to move her legs to stand up, but something was holding her down. Looking down, she saw the restraints, long, cold straps that bound her wrists and ankles to the floor. Panic gripped her chest, but she quickly forced it down. Stay calm, she told herself. She looked around, trying to get a sense of her surroundings. The room was dark, but the walls glowed faintly with a light she couldn't identify. A strange humming noise filled the air, and as she turned her head, she realized there were figures standing at the edges of the room watching her. Aliens. Lena's stomach dropped. They weren't human, not by a long shot. Their bodies were tall and thin, almost insect-like, with a sleek, black exoskeleton that shimmered in the dim light. Their eyes were huge and bulbous, glowing faintly with an eerie yellow light. They were staring at her with expressions that seemed both cold and calculating. The fear that had momentarily been pushed aside came rushing back. What do they want with me? The aliens didn't speak, but one of them stepped forward, a tall figure that stood even higher than the rest. It moved with smooth, practiced motions, like it was in complete control of the situation. As it neared, Lena tensed, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what they were going to do to her, but whatever it wasn't going to be good. The tall alien raised its hand, and the restraints holding Lena's arms and legs seemed to loosen of their own accord. She didn't dare try to escape, though. Not yet. Instead, she just watched as the alien spoke in a language she didn't understand. It was a sharp, clicking sound, the words flowing from its mouth in rapid succession. She could feel the tension in the air, but the meaning was lost on her. Then the alien stepped aside, and another figure approached. This one was different, a bit smaller, but its posture was still rigid and unyielding. It held something in its hand, some kind of device that glowed with a soft blue light. The alien aimed it at Lena's head, and she felt a strange tingling sensation along her skull. It didn't hurt, but it felt wrong. She tried to pull away, but the alien pressed the device closer. What are they doing to me? The alien leader stepped forward again and pressed a button on the wall beside her. The floor beneath her feet began to shift, and she felt a strange, sinking sensation in her stomach. Suddenly, the ground tilted, and the room began to change. The walls parted, revealing a wide, circular space with strange, glowing equipment attached to the ceiling and floor. The air was thick with a faint, metallic smell. The aliens guided her toward the center of the room, and Lena's heart started to pound in her chest. "What are they going to do to me?" she thought. She tried to keep her breathing steady, but the fear was beginning to creep in. The unknown was terrifying, and the way the aliens were behaving made it clear they didn't think she was just a regular human. There was something else about her, something they hadn't quite figured out yet. One of the smaller aliens stepped forward and placed a strange device against her temple. It was a smooth silver circle with a faint blue light glowing in the center. Before Lena could even react, it buzzed softly, and a sharp pain shot through her head. She flinched, trying to pull away, but the alien held her still with surprising strength. "Stay still," the alien commanded in a harsh, mechanical voice. "This will only take a moment." Lena gritted her teeth and clenched her fists. "I'm not weak. I'm not going to let them break me," she repeated in her mind. But the pain from the device was sharp, and the pressure on her skull was unbearable. For a moment, her vision blurred, and she had to force herself not to scream. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the pain stopped. Lena's head felt like it was buzzing, and her thoughts were clouded for a moment. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her mind. The alien seemed pleased with the result. The leader spoke again, his voice low and eerie. "Human," it said, "you are different." Lena's heart skipped a beat. What did it mean by that? Was it because of what they had just done to her? What did they find? The alien leader motioned for the smaller alien to step back. The device was removed, and the room seemed to settle. But Lena wasn't about to relax. She knew that whatever they were doing to her wasn't over. The aliens continued to move around her, silently working with their strange tools. Lena was growing more and more anxious by the second, but she kept her face impassive. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her panic. A cold, metallic voice echoed from the walls of the chamber, and Lena was startled to hear a translation of the alien language in perfect English. "Subject is of superior resilience. Adjusting methods. Superior resilience." Lena thought, what did they mean by that? The aliens began attaching strange sensors to her body, each one attached to a different part of her skin. They were small and smooth, almost like little metallic tattoos. As they pressed each one into place, Lena felt a slight shock run through her body, but she didn't let it show. She wasn't going to let them break her. The leader observed her closely, its alien eyes narrowing slightly. It clicked something into a device on its wrist, and suddenly, the room lit up with strange, colorful lights. Lena gasped as her vision became blurry for a moment, and she realized they were testing something. They were testing her. Lena's mind raced. "I can't just sit here. I need to figure out how to escape." She had no idea what they were doing to her, but she knew that whatever it wasn't good. The aliens might have been more advanced than humans in some ways, but they didn't know everything. They didn't know what she was capable of. As the lights flickered and the machines hummed, Lena could feel something stirring deep inside her. It was a strange, tingling sensation, like a current of electricity running through her veins. She'd never felt anything like it before, but there was a part of her that knew what it was. Her mutation. For years, Lena had hidden the truth about herself from the world. She had never shared her abilities with anyone, not even her closest friends. She'd learned early on that her powers were dangerous. But in this moment, deep in the heart of an alien ship, something inside her was waking up. Lena focused, trying to control the strange energy building within her. She could feel it pulsing, like a surge of power just beneath her skin. It was terrifying, but it was also her only hope. If she was going to survive this, she needed to harness this power, to use it against them. She focused all her attention on the sensors attached to her skin, imagining them bursting with energy. She could feel the vibrations of the metal beneath her, the energy coursing through her body, and she pushed harder. Come on, come on, she thought desperately. And then, just as the pressure inside her built to its peak, the sensors suddenly sparked, releasing a burst of energy that sent a wave of heat flooding through her body. The force was so strong that the restraints around her wrists and ankles snapped open, and she was free. Lena didn't hesitate. She sprang to her feet, ignoring the dizzying sensation in her head. The aliens hadn't expected this. They were scrambling now, their eyes widening in surprise. But Lena wasn't finished yet. She quickly gathered her thoughts and reached out with the power she felt surging within her, channeling it into her hands. The energy crackled around her palms, and before the aliens could react, she released it in a burst. The blast of energy knocked the smaller aliens off their feet, sending them crashing against the walls. The leader staggered back, its eyes flashing with anger and confusion. Lena could feel her heart racing, the power inside her making her feel alive, but she wasn't done. She had to escape. This is my chance. This is my only chance. But as she turned to run, the leader raised its hand, and suddenly, the walls of the room shifted, closing her in. A force field appeared, trapping her in the center of the chamber. Lena's heart sank. She had gotten so close, but now it felt like she was back to square one. The leader's voice echoed through the room. You will not escape this time, human. You are ours now. Lena swallowed hard, but her resolve didn't waver. They might have trapped her again, but they didn't understand what she was. She wasn't just some helpless human. They would soon learn that she was far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. And this was only the beginning. Lena was no longer the frightened, confused captive she had been when she first woke up aboard the alien ship. The fear was still there, of course. It would never go away completely. But it was buried under something else now. Something far more powerful. Determination. After the examination, after the shock of realizing just how different she was from the rest of the humans they'd captured, she couldn't just sit back and let them use her as their lab rat. They didn't understand her abilities. They didn't understand what she was capable of. And that made her dangerous in their eyes. But she wasn't about to let them control her. Not now. Not ever. Lena lay back in the small metallic cell where they kept her, her mind racing. The walls of her cell were smooth and cold, a dull silver that shimmered faintly in the dim light. It was a high-tech prison, there was no doubt about that. But Lena had been in tight spots before. She had always found a way out. This time would be no different. The problem was, she didn't know where she was, or how to get out. But she had one thing the aliens didn't: time. They weren't as quick to act as she was, and they still underestimated her. She had to use that. She stretched out on the metal floor, closing her eyes. She needed to focus. The power inside her was still new, still unpredictable, but it was growing stronger. The more she concentrated, the more she could feel it buzzing beneath her skin, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. It was her only chance. Her mind flashed back to the moment during the examination when she had broken free. The energy she had released had been raw and uncontrolled. It had worked, but it had also drained her more than she had expected. The alien technology around her was sophisticated, far more advanced than anything humans had created. But that didn't mean it was invincible. Lena was beginning to understand the ship's systems, its power grid, and the way the aliens controlled everything from their control rooms. She could feel their presence everywhere, and that gave her a place to start. Lena had learned something important about the ship during her examination. It was not just a place for studying aliens. It was a ship of war, filled with weapons and technology that could destroy entire planets. The X theory, the aliens who had captured her, were not just explorers. They were conquerors. Their goal was domination, and they saw humanity as just another species to control. But Lena wasn't about to be controlled. She was going to escape, and if she could, she would take down their entire ship. Over the next few days, Lena bided her time, studying every detail of the ship from the small window in her cell. The ship was massive. She had no idea how many floors or sections it had, but she could feel its size. There were constant sounds of movement in the halls, footsteps from the aliens walking past her door, and the occasional hum of the ship's engines. She learned to listen, to pay attention to every noise, every shift in the air. The first thing Lena did was memorize the layout of the ship as best she could. From her small window, she could see parts of the corridors and doors. They were sleek and metallic, with no obvious handles or locks, which made them impossible to open without the right code or access. She'd been trying to pick up on the security patterns, noticing that certain doors would open only when an alien approached with a specific badge or device. But Lena wasn't going to be trapped by locked doors. She had spent years learning to control her mutant abilities, and now they were her greatest asset. The energy that flowed through her veins wasn't just something she could use to break free of restraints. It could interact with electrical systems. In fact, she realized her powers could likely disrupt the ship's electronics. Her first few attempts were unsuccessful, but as she practiced, she could feel herself getting closer. She learned how to focus her energy, to concentrate on the flow of power running through the walls, through the wires that connected the various parts of the ship. The more she experimented, the more she realized she could interfere with the ship's security systems. Lights would flicker. Doors would briefly malfunction. Small signs that told her she was on the right track. She could feel the ship's pulse under her fingertips. She just needed to figure out how to use it to her advantage. Her energy wasn't limitless, though. It was a powerful force, but it came with a cost. The more she used it, the more drained she felt afterward. So Lena had to be smart. She couldn't just throw it around carelessly. She had to wait for the right moment, the perfect opportunity. That opportunity came sooner than she expected. One day, as she sat quietly in her cell, Lena heard the footsteps outside. They were heavier than usual, and they sounded rushed. She pressed her ear against the cold wall, straining to hear. It was a group of aliens, and they were speaking in their native language. Harsh, sharp clicks and hisses, but the tone was different this time. It was agitated. Lena's heart skipped a beat. She had learned to listen to these sounds, to understand the tone and urgency in their speech. They were on high alert. Something had happened. She didn't know what it was, but she could sense that it was important. For a moment, she considered staying where she was, playing it safe. But that feeling of urgency, that spark of instinct deep inside her, told her it was time to act. She had been waiting for this. Lena stood up and pressed her hands to the wall. The familiar tingling sensation flooded her body, and she focused her energy on the ship's power systems. She could feel the electric currents, the hum of the ship's engines, all flowing through the walls and floors. She could manipulate it. She could use it. She focused on one of the security doors near her cell, the one that had been the most difficult to open during her earlier experiments. She had studied it carefully, and now she knew its weakness. The energy surged within her, and she sent a burst of power straight into the control system. There was a brief flicker of light, a hum of energy, and then the door shuddered before it opened with a soft click. Lena smiled to herself. It worked. The door was open. But she couldn't waste any time. She quickly slipped into the hallway, careful to stay low and quiet. The ship's corridors were dimly lit, the walls gleaming with metallic surfaces that seemed to hum with life. It was almost like walking through the inside of a living creature. But Lena didn't stop to admire the strange architecture. She had a goal, and that was all that mattered now. She moved swiftly, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. The footsteps she had heard earlier were growing louder, and she knew she couldn't afford to get caught. She needed to get to the control room, the place where they operated the ship. If she could take control of the ship, disable the aliens' weapons, and get the ship to send out a distress signal to Earth, she could turn the tables. But to do that, she needed to know where everything was. She needed access to the ship's systems. As she turned a corner, Lena saw what she was looking for. A group of X-Theory aliens, standing guard outside a large, imposing door. This must be it. The control room. She took a deep breath. The time had come. Lena reached out with her power, sending a pulse of energy straight into the hallway. It was a small, concentrated burst, but enough to cause a distraction. The lights flickered. The door to the control room buzzed, then slammed open. The aliens were distracted for a brief moment, but that was all the time Lena needed. She dashed forward, slipping through the open door and into the heart of the alien ship. Lena's breath came in sharp, quick bursts as she crouched behind a row of alien consoles in the control room. The door to the ship's central command chamber had closed behind her with a quiet thud, leaving her in a room filled with unfamiliar alien technology. Her mind raced, trying to process everything at once. She had successfully infiltrated the control room, bypassing the security, and now she had to figure out how to disable the ship's systems and send out a distress signal to Earth. But that was easier said than done. The control room was vast, with sleek, smooth surfaces glowing softly in the dim light. At the far end of the room were massive, complex machines. Hundreds of different levers, buttons, and glowing screens lined the walls, each one more intricate than the last. In the center of the room, there was a large, circular holographic table displaying maps of star systems, blinking in rhythm with the ship's pulse. Lena's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. She knew she couldn't afford to be careless. One wrong move, and the aliens would be onto her. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she knew she had to push forward. She had come too far to turn back now. She reached for her powers, the tingling energy still pulsing inside her. With a deep breath, she focused, trying to pinpoint the control panel that would give her access to the ship's systems. She could feel the hum of the ship beneath her skin. The same energy that had been keeping her captive could now be her ticket to freedom. For a moment, everything was quiet. She could hear the faint hum of the engines, the distant shuffling of footsteps echoing down the hall outside. The aliens had no idea she was here. Not yet. Lena's fingers brushed over a row of consoles, each one lighting up as she pressed them. Nothing happened at first, and she felt a wave of frustration building. She had to hurry. The more time she wasted, the closer the aliens were to realizing she was inside. But then, she felt it. A soft pulse of energy, like a spark of light in the darkness. She pressed harder. The screen in front of her flickered to life. A command prompt appeared, written in the aliens' language, but to Lena, it might as well have been a string of random symbols. She swore under her breath. She didn't have time to learn their language, not when the pressure was on. Then she remembered something. The translator device the aliens had used on her when they first captured her. If she could connect her energy to the system, she might be able to override it and force the device to translate for her. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it was the only chance she had. Lena took a deep breath, focusing. She reached out with her power, sending a surge of energy toward the console. She felt the hum of the alien systems resist at first, but then her energy broke through. The lights on the console flickered and dimmed, and the text on the screen slowly began to change. The symbols twisted and reshaped until they were in English. Success, she thought, a small wave of relief washing over her. Now she could read the system's commands. She quickly scanned through the various options, her heart racing as she realized that the alien ship was far more complex than she had imagined. There were firewalls everywhere, encrypted systems, and data clusters locked behind layers of protection. She would have to be careful. She worked quickly, navigating the maze of the ship's security. Her fingers flew across the screen, and each time she bypassed a security check, she felt a surge of confidence. She was getting closer. Her energy was focused, her mind sharp. But then, suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the control room. Lena froze. Footsteps. Lots of them. The aliens were coming. She wasn't fast enough. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized that the aliens had discovered her presence. The momentary panic faded, replaced by a cold sense of resolve. She could still do this. She had to. Lena didn't hesitate. She slammed her fist against the console, sending a pulse of energy into the system. Sparks flew from the panels, and the screens went black. It was a temporary shutdown, just long enough to give her time to make her escape. But she knew the aliens would be back soon, angrier than ever. Quickly, she slid off her seat and ducked behind a large console near the wall. She could hear the aliens' voices now, growing louder as they approached the room. They were speaking in their harsh, clicking language, but she didn't need to understand their words to know what was happening. They were coming to find her. Just then, the door to the control room slammed open, and 4 alien soldiers stormed inside. They were armed with long, sleek energy rifles, their eyes scanning the room for. Lena's pulse quickened, but she didn't panic. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She could feel the energy inside her surging, ready to burst. She didn't need to fight them all. She just needed to buy herself enough time to get out. Without warning, Lena unleashed a burst of power, sending a wave of energy straight at the nearest soldier. The force of the blast sent him flying across the room, crashing into a wall with a sickening thud. The other soldiers reacted quickly, raising their rifles and aiming at her, but Lena was already moving. She dashed across the room, using the confusion to her advantage. She grabbed a loose piece of alien equipment from a nearby table and hurled it at one of the soldiers. The device exploded in a burst of light, temporarily blinding the others. Lena didn't stop to watch them struggle. She dashed for the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't let them catch her. She couldn't get caught now. Just as she reached the door, an alarm blared through the entire ship. Red lights flashed, and the air seemed to hum with tension. The ship's systems were coming back online. The aliens knew she was escaping, and they were not going to let her get away that easily. Lena's mind raced. I can't be caught. I can't. She darted into the corridor, sprinting as fast as she could. The ship's halls were dimly lit, the walls lined with strange alien symbols and glowing consoles. She had no idea where she was going, but she didn't care. All that mattered was getting away from the soldiers. Her feet pounded against the metal floor as she rounded a corner and ducked into a narrow hallway. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and she could hear the aliens calling to each other, their voices harsh and frantic. They were closing in. Lena could feel her energy beginning to wane. She had used so much of it already, fighting the soldiers, hacking into the ship's systems, disabling their alarms. But she wasn't about to stop now. She had to keep going. And then, something unexpected happened. As Lena rounded another corner, she found herself face to face with a group of ex-Theri soldiers. But these weren't the same soldiers she had fought before. These were different. Older, their faces marked with the scars of battle. They didn't have the same cold, calculating look as the others. For a moment, the two groups stood there, frozen, staring at each other. The soldiers hesitated. They didn't know what to make of Lena. She wasn't like the other humans they had captured. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was something more, something dangerous. Without warning, one of the soldiers stepped forward. His eyes locked with Lena's, and for a brief moment, they shared a silent understanding. Lena didn't know what he wanted. Was he going to help her, or was he just trying to trap her again? But before she could react, the soldier raised his hand and shouted something in his language. The other soldiers moved to surround her. But then, something even more unexpected happened. The walls of the ship began to tremble, and a loud screeching noise filled the air. The ship was shaking. Lena's heart skipped a beat. What was happening? The soldier who had stepped forward turned toward the others and spoke in a low, urgent tone. Then he nodded to Lena. "Follow us," he said, his voice unexpectedly calm. Lena's mind raced. What did he mean? Before she could ask, the soldier gestured for her to follow him. She had no choice. She had to trust him. And just like that, Lena found herself in the middle of something far bigger than her escape. The rebellion on the alien ship had begun, and she was now part of it. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she followed the alien soldier through the dark, winding hallways of the ship. The ship was alive with noise, alarms blaring in the distance, and the heavy vibrations beneath her feet made her feel as though the entire structure was about to collapse. She had never felt so tense in her life, but there was something different now. Something new. She wasn't running away anymore. She wasn't just trying to escape. Now, Lena was part of something bigger. The rebellion was beginning. Lena felt a jolt of hope. "You mean we can take the ship down?" The young alien nodded. "Not just the ship, the entire fleet. We have the power to bring an end to their reign of terror, but we need you. You're the key." Lena was silent for a long moment, processing what he had said. She had always thought of herself as powerless. She had never seen herself as a hero, let alone the key to bringing down an empire. But what if it was true? What if the power inside her could really be used to stop the X-Theory? Her thoughts were interrupted by the older alien who had spoken earlier. "Lena, we've studied your powers. They're unlike anything we've seen before. You can manipulate energy. You can control the very systems that run this ship. With your help, we can take control of the ship's central core and disable its weapons. We can shut down the power grid. We can send out a distress signal to Earth." Lena shook her head again. "I don't know if I can do that. I'm not in control of my powers yet. They're unpredictable." The young alien stepped closer to her. "You don't need to control them perfectly. You just need to focus them. Use them to disrupt the core systems. We'll help you. We've planned this for years." Lena looked around the room at the faces of the rebels, all of them staring at her with hope in their eyes. They believed in her. They were putting their faith in her. And for the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She didn't feel like just a prisoner anymore. She felt like she was part of something bigger. The older alien spoke again. "There is no turning back now. Once you send that distress signal, Earth will know what's happening. The X-Theory will know that they've been betrayed. And it will be war. A war for freedom." Lena's mind was racing. She thought of Earth, of her family, of everything she had lost. The X-Theory had taken so much from her. And now she had a chance to take something back. "I'm in," Lena said, her voice steady. "Let's end this." The older alien nodded, his face solemn. "Good. We'll begin the final preparations." For the next few hours, Lena worked alongside the rebels, helping them prepare for the mission ahead. They connected their systems to the ship's core, preparing to infiltrate the heart of the X-Theory warship. Every step they took brought them closer to their goal, but Lena knew that the risk was greater than ever. If they failed, the X-Theory would come for them, and the entire rebellion would be destroyed. But for the first time in a long time, Lena felt alive. She had a purpose now. The reckoning was coming, and she was ready.